We are recording. Well, good evening, everybody, or whatever it happens to be in your neck of the woods. It is cold, like frigid cold, here on the East Coast. But I was watching the Chiefs game last night, and the coach has a very distinctive mustache. Like this is a very impressive mustache, and it was frozen the whole way through. Like each strand was icicles. He almost looked like a walrus by the time the game was over because these icicles were just stretching down from it was something. It was something. But they had a win, so I'm okay with it. I'll take it. I felt bad for who were they playing? Was it Florida? Yeah, I felt bad for him with that. That doesn't seem fair. If you're a team in Florida, you are not prepped for the winter cold at all, much less this -2 degrees that it was for the game. But I'm digressing here, people. I'm digressing. It is good to see each of your smiling faces. I hope you're doing well. Happy New Year to those of you who haven't seen since the calendar flipped on us. We are continuing the series that we've been doing for a while here, and then took a little break around Christmas there, but we're coming back at it. This idea of God's nature being love, not just something that he is loving as if it's an adjective, but that he actually is love, that it's a noun, that it's his identity, it's his essence. We can't disconnect love from who he is, nor can we disconnect him from love itself. So with that in mind, we've looked at love being patient. So we've got God's patient, God's kind. He doesn't brag, he doesn't boast. We've looked at each of these so far, and we find ourselves today looking at two located in the second half of First Corinthians 13, verse 5. And so if we back up to the beginning of the text, we got love does not act unbecomingly, which we looked at last time. It does not seek its own. It's not provoked. It does not take into account a wrong suffered. And then we had it there in a variety of other translations. I don't know if you noticed. I wanted to point one thing out to you that I had never noticed before, and I had to go and get my lexicon out and try and remember 20 years into the past to when I was taught how to do stuff like that to confirm something. But it's correct. If you notice there in the New American Standard, the first section that's underlined, is not provoked. So again, it's talking about love. It's talking about God, for God is love, right? That's been our main premise here. So it's saying God is not provoked. Now, in that sentence, God is the recipient of the action in grammar, meaning that it says God is not provoked. Not that God doesn't provoke others, but that God himself is not provoked. When you look at it in the Greek, the other translations are actually more accurate. God is the cause of the action, not the recipient. Meaning it's not a matter of God not being provoked. That's probably true too. But it's that God does not provoke others. Provocation, getting somebody riled up, doesn't originate from God. He doesn't go about, creating scenarios designed to test us and to kind of see if we're going to respond as he would have us to respond. He doesn't produce situations like that. It was noteworthy to me because usually, when it comes to the tensing stuff, the New American Standard tends to be a little bit better than most of the translations. But in this one specific instance, it just plain gets it wrong. And uniquely, almost every other translation does in fact get it correct that God is not the recipient of the action in this sentence. God is actually the one um, who is made clear does not provoke. He doesn't cause provocation, and he doesn't take into account a wrong suffered. The McKnight translation we've been using quite a bit. Love doesn't provoke. Again, notice that causal action. It's God. God does not cause that to come upon somebody, and it doesn't calculate the bad. Love is not easily irritated. It's not quick to take offense from the Passion Translation. The mirror, love is not spiteful. It gets no mileage out of another's mistakes. It bears no record of wrongs. Are you noticing a lot of these accounting terms here? We have, let's see, does not calculate the bad. Accounting does not take into account was in the New American Standard. The mirror has it as it bears no record. So we have accounting, we have record, we have calculation. As you probably guessed, that term outside of Scripture, as it's used everywhere else in Greek, is a term of mathematics. It's an accounting term. It's a reckoning. Think an auditor coming in, to your business, and if you claimed that you purchased 63 pallets of paper, they're going to come in and they're going to count, and there better be 63 pallets of paper, because if not, there's going to be repercussions. Um, I don't know what you all do for a living, so don't take this personally if you happen to work for the Internal Revenue Service. But think the IRS. That's the context of the statement here. That this is someone who is coming in, and their intention isn't to make sure you're getting all of the things due to you in a positive light, as in, we want to audit you because we think you're owed a refund. No, 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 no. The implication of the term is they're coming in and they're checking because they think that maybe, just maybe, you haven't followed through on something you were supposed to do. It's trying to catch you in something. And again, all of these are negative statements. So the implication is God does not do that. The First Nations translation, it is not hot-headed, nor does it keep track of wrongs done to it. So that first word, that provoke, paroxeno in the Greek, it just means to urge, to push forward, manipulate to action, to upset or pick on, specifically in an arbitrary manner. The idea is that you're almost just going out of your way to see who you're. Have you ever been in a scenario where there's somebody kind of, it could be, I've heard this from kids a lot. In my work, a lot of kids got issues with their teachers, and they'll tell you, this teacher just picks on me. And as you talk to them, it turns out, no, the teacher's kind of giving them some extra attention because the teacher wants the best for them and is kind of concerned that they're falling behind. But then occasionally, maybe once every 30 times I talk to a kid about this, I find out, no, this teacher just kind of sounds like a jerk. This teacher essentially is just kind of looking around the room and deciding who the most vulnerable target is. And they laser in on that in order to get a laugh from the other kids in the room as a way to assert dominance, all those kinds of things. That's kind of what's built into this word provoke. The person who provokes is going around looking around a room, trying to identify who is the easiest target, who is the easiest one that I can victimize. It's a predatory term. It's think of, and again, without getting into too much of this because it can trigger a lot of stuff for folks. But if we think about like what we encounter with those who like are involved in human trafficking, those who what's the word I want? They prep others to enter into that. What's that term? Um,
Groom?
Groom. Thanks, Carrie. Those that groom individuals for that kind of exploitation. That's that word provoke. They are going to find something of weakness in you and exploit it. And that belief that many have about God, but that First Corinthians makes clear is not true of God, that prompts a lot of behaviors within the faith, within our interactions with our brethren, if we allow it, in the sense of we fear vulnerability, because if we really can't even be vulnerable with God, how can we be vulnerable with one another? How can we trust that people aren't going to try to exploit us and hurt us and cause challenge for us? And so instead, it brings something up of self-preservation, of let me put a mask on and keep myself at distance from people, or at least project to them the image of myself that I want them to see. To sharpen, that was interesting to me. I don't think of the word to sharpen something, like to sharpen a knife or anything, when I think of the word provoke, but particularly as the word exists in much of external Greek, meaning Greek outside of the New Testament. It means to sharpen like an object or a tool with particularly to make that object a weapon. Is the implication. So there is somewhat of a harshness to this sharpening. You're not like sharpening a knife so that you can better cut your turkey. You're sharpening that knife so that it can be injected into somebody. It's designed to be a term of abuse, of harm. And in that sense, it does tie in with everything else we looked at, right? Within this idea to push forward, manipulate to action, to upset. that pushing forward or trying to manipulate somebody into doing the very thing that what is it Paul says, the thing I most want to do, I don't do, and the thing I desperately don't want to do, I end up doing. That's that provocation where it, it, it's horrific to me to think that for so much of my life, I won't speak for you, there was an element of perception of God that way. We took a couple obscure passages in the book of James, and we turn God from one who um, essentially implements a refiner's fire that removes everything that isn't him, leaving this beautiful gold. That's it's the testing of a metal. When James uses, about the testing, that testing is the testing of metal. It's a refiner's fire process, which if we get into all that, that's not a negative thing. But we've interpreted it as God's going around creating little scenarios, because we're his little marionettes on a chess. Oh, no, that's a double description. Let's not use that. We're pawns on a chessboard or marionettes on a little kid stage, and he's moving us around to his delight and joy to see how much he can mess with us. And if, like Job, will we stay to the end? Will we stick through? Um, and so, if you believe that of your father, you're going to expect it of your pastor, your brethren in Christ. You'll expect that of your earthly parents. Um, what we believe about God, even to the atheist, even to the agnostic, what we believe about God is critically important because it determines how we perceive every other relationship. If he is the originator, if he is the source, if he is the one from whom all of us flow, the originator of humanity, we are going to naturally look to him and our relationship with him as the determinant for how relationships are supposed to be. And so, if you believe that when you mess up, God removes you from his presence and casts you into outer darkness, uh, that's what you will believe will happen when you screw up in the natural, when you screw up in your human interactions with everybody else. Um, Rather than, even in my darkest, he's still there. I make my bed in the place of the grave, often mistranslated hell. If I make my bed there, he's still there. If I go up, he goes up too. If I go down, he goes down. If I go to the left, he goes left. If I go to the right, he goes to the right. We are so interconnected with him. Wherever he is found, we are found. And then by extension, wherever we are found, he is found also. That's union. That's union. That second word, that take into account. We mentioned this last time. There's a lot of words in Greek where they do with one word what takes 5 to 10 from us in English to actively express. So this word loesome, it means to take into account, and it's just one word, comprises all these different English words. To reckon, to compile, to appraise or calculate, to take inventory, specifically when you're taking inventory with the intent of estimating something's worth. And that's where this can get ugly. If we believe that he tests us and he's provoking us, he's trying to see, he's poking the bear, trying to see if he can get a negative reaction out of us and show we're not worthy. The intention of all of that, then, by extension, is in our minds going to be he wants to see what I'm worth. Am I worth, in the case of more of a hardcore Western model, a hardcore capital E evangelistic model? He does this with the intention of making sure, are we worthy of salvation? Are we worthy of his sacrifice that made us, able to be looked upon by the Father? Can you see how that could motivate our actions and motivate the manner in which we interact with one another, the way we see ourselves, the way we see our children, the way we see. I mean, keep in mind, those who hold to that premise also believe that that beautiful little baby that they're looking at that just popped out of their mom 30 minutes before is inherently evil, vile, and damned. That belief, which we talk about how that originates with Augustine, and that's true to a degree. He formalizes the concept, but he's just taking a new concept from old concepts that were always misconstrued. If you believe God is inherently disgusted with you, you have to then ask yourself, well, when did that disgust start? And then you encounter a couple random scriptures that you piece together and try and build a theology around. It all is interconnected. And it all goes back to the origin story of Adam and his concept of who God was and who he was in God. The last word there that does not take into account that wrong suffered. Um, the that word suffered, if you notice, even like in the, if you look this up like in the New American Standard, etc., that word suffered is in italics, meaning it was added to try and express the concept. They're not trying to mislead. This wasn't like they're, changing the words to be defending of their theology or something. It's just they're trying to articulate, it's not just that you've been wronged, but that it was a wrong that really hurt. It was a wrong um that had trauma connected to it. This was an enduring hurt. And so we see then too, he doesn't take into account, he doesn't keep a record. He's not taking inventory of all of the times that in our interactions with him or in our refusal to have interaction with him, hurt may have been caused. Um, there's a lot of dispute as to the nature in which God feels. And you got multiple camps of solid people who have differences of view in this. Um, my own thought is, if he's a person and possesses personhood, not innately human, but a personhood, and he has relationship in and of himself and relationship with his creation, in which he's pulled us into in union, he's going to feel. When we have, what was the shortest passage in the whole Bible, and Jesus wept, right? Uh, what was he exhibiting, some type of psychosocial fit, or was something emotionally impacting him that prompted tears? The latter seems a lot more reasonable to me than just he all of a sudden broke out in tears for no reason. He feels. And so, in the midst of his feeling, especially if we look at Jesus specifically within the Trinity, look at his personhood specifically, if he was tested in all the ways we are, he had to have been capable of feeling, because feeling is what prompts half of the mess that exists in our challenging times with interacting with people. We get our feelings hurt, which prompts us to hurt others, and it just becomes this big convoluted mess. Um, if he feels, then he's capable of having injury done to him, but he doesn't take account of that injury. He doesn't keep an inventory of it. There's no attempt to seek how he can throw this back at us. There's no attempt to decide what our punishment's going to be for having wronged him in this way. Uh, all of the wrong he takes. What does Jesus tell us? If someone strikes you on one cheek, what is our response to be? We offer the other one. The text suggests you are leaning forward and like going like this. Not just that you stand there and you're bracing yourself if they hit the other, but no, you actually are offering it. Okay, here, if that'll make you feel better, go ahead. Um, Very quickly, and I'm not going to stay here long, because back in the day when all of my teaching was done in a building, I used to have a joke. I'd look at Carrie when I was about to say something that could cause offense, and I'd say, "Carrie, go start the car," because I needed a fast exit if this was going to go south. But in the Zoom world, we're a little safer. But I'm still not going to harp here. What does this do to our perceptions of things like self-defense? Our perceptions of national defense? Our perceptions of defending your neighbor, in that we have some pretty good solid scriptural evidence that there is noteworthiness, value in defending others, in finding the least of these, my brethren, and doing it as unto them, defending them, protecting them. But at the same time, we have this scenario where it's personal. When someone harms you, the response we are to have is not innately one of self-defense. It's innately one of, okay, I'm turning my other cheek now and I'm offering it to you. Um, Yet simultaneously, we possess the nature and character of God, for he is indwelled in us, right? In him we live and move and have our being. Galatians 2:20 says then it's the life that we live is his life. And so we don't want ourselves devalued and harmed, because to do so is to harm the image of God that we carry. So it's this stuff is just amazing to me, because it makes us think of this. It prompts good questions much more so than it prompts definitive answers. And I think that's why we don't ask them very often. We can get uncomfortable sometimes with questions that don't have a firm answer, questions that have competing interests, where on the one hand, I'm to offer my other cheek to let them harm me again. Um, and as a trauma psychologist, I got to tell you, that makes me cringe, because I work with a whole lot of people where that's what they've done for their entire life, is perpetually put themselves out there and said, hit me again. Um, and yet we know that the imprint of God that each of us carries is precious and is to be protected and preserved. Um, so it fascinates me. I like the puzzle, the mystery of, I can see both sides of this thing. And I don't know about you, I find that happening more all the time, where I am less certain. I'm less concrete in my decisions. I can't produce for you an answer as much as I've thought about it, and kind of here's all the different possible answers. And I get what this one's saying. I get what this one's saying. And I kind of get what this one's saying too. And I wonder if that, in a way, is what Father's bringing us back to, where it's about the union and the connection with one another far more so than it is about agreement, far more so than it is about us having the exact same doctrines, the exact same perceptions, the exact same understandings of things. I'm reading a book, and do I have it handy here? I'm not sure where I put it. But this book it was published in like 1820, and it's on the ancient history of universalism, is what it's called. Talk about a lofty title. But the intention is to try to track how different eras of the church approached universalism. And while the person himself believes in ultimate reconciliation, he does a really good job of just, this person did not. It's clear from their writings. They say this, this, and this, and interesting book. But anyway, he starts off mentioning, if we look at the early church, those folks you hear about, like, if you tune in to Brad Jersak for any length of time, and you hear about Polycarp and Irenaeus, Irenaeus, and Clement of Rome, when you hear about these dudes back, first century AD, they didn't know Jesus, but they knew Peter, they knew Paul. Okay, those folks. They don't talk about it at all, and that baffles this guy. And he's like, it's not that they are universalists or aren't universalists. They don't discuss it. And then the next paragraph, he says, wait a minute, I think I figured it out. When you're actively being persecuted, when all you're trying to do is express to a world that has only known Roman and Greek mythology, or the punitive God of the Old Testament. Again, remember, the Old Testament's through a veil, right? They're seeing God through a veil. This punitive God. If that's all people know, all you can express is that God loves you. The implications of that eternally, the implications of afterlife, don't even talk about any of that, because you're just trying to express a world that wants you dead. But then 200, 300 years later, the church is more secure. By 400 or so, it's the official religion of Rome, and so it's now protected by the state. Now you start talking about these little intricacies of the faith, because you're safe and secure to do so. You hear about this sometimes with like during the Second World War. You had there's a somewhat noteworthy story that's the gentleman wrote books about it and about their experience. But there was a Baptist minister and a Roman Catholic priest who were both in a Japanese prison camp. And if you know anything about the Japanese prison camps of the World War II era, this is horrific stuff. I mean, this is not, the Hogan's Heroes reruns that we think of with prison camp. This is hardcore. And these two became best friends. Um, they fed one another when the other wasn't strong enough to feed themselves. They prayed together. They supported one another, and those moments of defeat that when you're in that kind of a horrible situation, you and I can only imagine in that type of a situation what would go through your head as far as where is God in the midst of this. Just those moments of doubt, they supported one another. Now I want you to think about what I just told you. Not only did a Baptist minister support a Roman Catholic priest in his faith, but the Roman Catholic priest received it from him as from a brother, because in that setting, they saw themselves as brothers. Now, fast forward that 50 years. And those two gentlemen, separate from that horrific experience they were sharing together, believes the other damned, believes the other incapable of fellowship. The Baptist will not give communion to the Catholic, and the Catholic will not give the Mass Eucharist to the Protestant, to the Baptist. So the moral seems to be connected to that same thing that author realizes about the early church. When you have a common threat, not a common enemy, that's bad, twisted thinking. We have no enemies. When we have a common threat, there's the common thing that we share that's trying to harm us. It brings us together and we find the similarity. We find what holds us in common with one another. But it's in times of safety, when things are okay, when we don't have those kinds of threats coming at us. That's when we start nitpicking individual little differences about the format of the faith and the extent to which grace is distributed and who has access to grace and all these big things. In times of threat, which is all the early church was in, right? They're meeting in houses because they couldn't meet in public because they were illegally meeting, right? As all that's happening, what held them in common was their love for one another, their love for their shared father, the love that they now were beginning to feel as they were interconnected to that eternal father. As all of that is unfolding, love was the only language of the early Christian faith. It's not until we get comfortable, when we don't have to worry about persecutions, that's when we start to become a bit more ecumenical. Corrie ten Boom, who you might be familiar with, somewhat famous writer, she and her sister, well, her sister, and they're both living with their father, who I think is like a watchmaker or something, and they decide that they are going to hide Jews during the the World War II Holocaust era. And if I remember, are they in Holland? I know they're not. Yeah, they're Holland. I know they're not in Germany. They're Holland, in Holland. And when the Nazis invade Holland, their policies elsewhere that they were in control, like Germany and Austria, and they institute those in Holland. And so her father is taken to a prison camp, and I think he dies there, if I remember right. I could be wrong about that. But Corrie ten Boom and her sister are both sent to the same concentration camp. In her book, I think it's called A Hiding Place. I read it years and years. A movie about it too, I think. Check it out. It's worth the watch, definitely. Um, they befriend other people in this concentration camp, and Corrie ten Boom mentions these are people that on the outside we would have never interacted. Our paths would have never crossed, and when they did, it would have been negatively, as in, well, you know what those Reformed people think. You know what those Catholics believe. Yeah, if I remember right, that they were Dutch Reform, I think was their religion, their denomination. But in the prison camp, in this concentration camp setting, where you essentially are just waiting to die, you're wondering when the next shoe is going to drop and the next punishment's going to come, and you don't know what tomorrow holds. Oh yeah, you can get pulled into a covenantal relationship with people very unlike you very fast because the nature of the common threat is what interconnects. And she actually makes the statement that at the end of the day, all that remained was love. That after you stripped away the theology differences, you stripped away their opinions, their church histories, all that remained was love, which gets us right back to the early church uh, model. Two quick quotes for you. This is on page 2 of the notes. This first gentleman, Hans Urs von Balthasar. That's a name. That's a name. Carrie, call the courthouse. I am changing because that is a name. You hear somebody whose name is Hans Urs von Balthasar, and you know you are dealing with someone who has some prominence, right? You hear that name. This is the real McCoy. He is a Catholic theologian in the 1930s through 60s, and he says love alone is credible. Nothing else can be believed, and nothing else ought to be believed. Saint Isaac the Syrian, who interestingly, while canonized by the Western Church, Catholicism, he's canonized by the Eastern Church, the Orthodox. We hardly ever hear about this fella, and his writings are absolutely phenomenal. But here's one thing he said: among all his actions, he's talking about God. Among all his actions, there is none which is not entirely a matter of mercy, love, and compassion. This constitutes the beginning and the end of his dealings with us. Elsewhere, he has an exposition where he says, if God is love and Jesus is God, then Jesus is fully love. And so when Jesus is referred to as the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, it's the beginning and the end of what? What's the beginning and the end of love? So are you then saying love has an end? And he says, God forbid, love has no end. For how do I get this right? Love has invested itself in the eternal. So by love being God and God being eternal, knowing no beginning, no end, all of the Alpha and the Omega is found in Jesus. Love itself has no beginning, it has no end, it has no capacity to be exhaustible, it has no ability to run out, it's not in short supply, it doesn't have to be replenished. It simply exists eternally because he exists eternally. For love is God and God is love. Bob.
So if the common challenge, enemy, mission, whatever common ground you want to call it, that brings us all into a common place, the common challenge would be the right word. If that becomes expressing to the world that doesn't understand that God is love, if that becomes our theology, we don't need any of the rest of it. We just that just that's the thing we all have in common. You know, Wrigley, who made a fortune and built a downtown skyscraper in Chicago and Wrigley Field, he made a fortune selling a product that only sold for a penny a piece. And his philosophy was, if I have two executives that think alike, I don't need one of them. If if we get caught up on our brothers and our sisters thinking like us, then all of a sudden we lose the power of the quantum multiplier of what God's telling all of us. Does that make sense? I mean, if a problem gets presented to us right now and everybody says, Bob, you tell us a solution, then the only power we have to solve that solution right now in this group is my two eyes and my experience and my emotions and my intelligence. But if we say, group, how do we face this problem? How do we deal with this issue? And as a group, we see it. We have 24 eyes. we have 12 sets of experience, or 14 actually. We have 28 eyes, 12 sets of experience, 12 sets of emotion, and the compounded IQ of everybody in the group focusing on that problem. I'm beginning to wonder, matter of fact, was on a call this morning, and this is what came to me. That's what God's got in mind. He's put us all here. We're all different. But as we come together, doing each of us our best to communicate him without critiquing the other's best, but rather seeing them as another opinion, all of a sudden we've multiplied the spiritual message quantumly. And we can quit talking about ourselves and start talking to the people that need to hear what needs to be said. Is that where we're going here?
I think that's phenomenal. I want to get the name right. Randall Worley. If you don't ever follow Randall, he's somebody to check out. He he's one of those people he's on social media, but he does not do a whole lot of posting. So when he does, it is gold. And one of the things that he gave a caution within the last 2 days he put out there, in all of our desire to see people free, and that's the most noteworthy and significant of goals, right? To see people free. In the midst of all of that, let's be careful that we don't just swing our sword in an attempt to knock their sword down. Meaning that in our looking at them and saying that I really don't agree with, don't you see how this is holding you in bondage? Don't you see how this is, controlling you? If we lose our affection and our gentleness for people because we misconstrue the lies they believe with them, that we marry the two in our mind, that somehow our what we're combating becomes a person, rather than, no, we're combating an idea. We're combating an idea that is binding a person. It's hurting the person. And so he adds this little caution of, if we don't demonstrate love, if we just talk about love, we're no different than anybody else. We're just a different religion. We're just out there espousing the same thing. But if we're really breaking it down just to an active demonstration of love, that maintains our peace, that keeps our connection with people, it keeps relationship. It's I completely think that's the direction this is flowing. We're called to live out of that union, and if that union isn't love, I don't know what it is. There is no other reason for God to include us in all that he is, if it's not to be a participant in that which exists between Father, Son, and Spirit, which inherently is just love. For again, if God is love, I know I get repetitive with this, but I think it's important to follow the chain of thought here. If God is love, and in the beginning, all that exists eternally is Father, Son, and Spirit, then all that exists is love. It is the source. Love is the originator of everything else that exists. Even in a twisted sense, when we think about, the evil that mankind can sometimes create, and horrible things like hate and whatever else, hate is essentially misconstrued and misapplied love. It's the love of self causes you to self-preserve yourself, which makes you hate your neighbor because you think your neighbor's trying to take what you love. Even in that context, it still reverts back to love being the originating source of everything else. Vicky.
Hi, I have a question for Bob. I don't mean to sound like a heretic here, but allow me to just pose. When I hear you talk about, or what I thought I heard you talk about, was everyone together, and together, our intellect is exponentially advanced, etc. And I think of the Old Testament that talks about there being wisdom and many counselors, but in the New Testament, we're told we have the Spirit, the counselor. The other piece, I'm at that age where I'm forgetting my second thoughts all the time. Oh, the idea that Einstein had said that he's never solved a problem on the plane on which the problem was. So it's kind of like, and Einstein he wasn't a Christian, but he had a God belief. So the idea that we don't, in our own logic, intellect, and stuff, find the answer among ourselves makes me just wonder if I'm misunderstanding you, because I'm sort of thinking that it's that unity of me and the Father, He's love, and in Him I'm love, that from there, with others, with Him at the core, and love is the expression of Him, maybe we come together. But that's not how I heard you, and I'm sure I probably misheard, and
Well,
I'm just wondering if you would comment.
if one of us sounds like a heretic, it's probably me. Okay, because I'm inferring that that we are more attuned to God than religion would tell us we are. Um, what Matt just said is love isn't an ingredient of who we are, it is the ingredient of who we are originally. And if we are made in the image of God, then we literally have the DNA of God. That's the most basic breakdown of who we are that we can find. That's the one thing that identifies each one of us individually. And what I'm and furthermore, the New Testament would tell us we have that same spirit that raised Jesus from the dead. We're absolutely spirit driven. So what I'm saying is that instead of us seeing ourselves as well, this will be an odd analogy, but I got it a week or so ago. Instead of seeing ourselves like a Windows machine, that the operating system, I'm a Windows machine and you're a Mac, and so on and so forth. Everybody's got their own operating system, and once in a while we can come together on the internet, but then we've got to go out to our own individual machine and do stuff. We are a thin client. I happen to use a Chromebook. Nothing runs on my machine but the operating system that connects me to the internet that gives me everything else I do. Okay, and 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 I've been praying now for about 8 weeks that the Lord would make me a thin place, a place that 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 there's very little between me and whatever He's saying or whatever He's doing. And in order to do that, I need to capitalize on whatever He's given me, whatever intellect He's given me, whatever emotion He's given me, whatever experience He's given me, as something that He's planted in me so that I can utilize that individual strength, that individual experience in reflecting who He is. Because in the ultimate, if each one of us is an individual, but we're made in His image, then all of us are facets of Him. And I say Him generically, by the way, but all of us are facets of the Creator. And so I'm not saying we're God, but I am saying we're images of God. And I am saying that I'm not saying that we're supposed to have little kingdoms, quite the opposite. I'm saying that we are all very individualistic representatives of the same one central kingdom, which, by the way, Matt just said, and I agree with him, the element, not the primary element, not an element, but the element of it is love. And so, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, and I've been thinking about it through this whole call, so forgive me. But that may mean, as much as I hate that kind of preaching, that may mean that some people need to hear a message about hell to get their attention. I don't believe in hell, but I've seen people's lives changed after they heard a message about it. And maybe that doctrine that is absolutely revolting to me, maybe it's another way to reach people. I mean, my big theological prayer was I sat on the edge of a bed with a pistol and said, God, you're going to have to help me. I can't handle this anymore. Now, where are you going to find that in Scripture? And by the way, every major experience I've ever had with the Lord was outside of church service. And the Lord just decided to show me something or speak to me through some unique situation or thing, or just all of a sudden it just appeared to me. And so we must not discount ourselves because we're created in the image of the Creator. And that, think how the world could change if everybody woke up tomorrow deciding to love God and love their neighbor as they love themselves. It's that simple. Nobody'd be hungry. Nobody'd be homeless. Nobody'd be deserted. Nobody'd be abused.
And it brings up a thought where what is the goal? Meaning is the goal to we call it conversion, right? Where what you described there is termed a conversion experience. Not that you go from one state to another, but your thinking converts. In that moment, you encounter something, and that something redirects your path in a way that you were focusing left, and now all of a sudden you find yourself steering right. It converted our thinking. What is the purpose of conversion? In the model that we've largely rejected, it was, and this kind of gets, I think, into some of what Jane was saying. It shifts us from I'm trying to get people out of a punitive state that awaits them, to the goal being to them awaken to the goodness they get to experience right now. That life doesn't. We're not saving. And this is I'm careful when I work with people about using the word saved, because my context, I think that's still a valid word. It's just I no longer believe that the ultimate saving is saving somebody from this fictitious concept of eternal conscious torment. And instead, I'm saving them from the drudgery of everyday life, living in a sense of disunion, not actual disunion. We can't be separate. Again, if we make our bed in the grave, he's right there with us. We go left, he goes left. We go right, he goes right. We're never disunioned. But to a person who feels disconnected, it still feels very real, even if we understand it isn't the case. So in that sense, what are we converting people to? Are we converting them to our way of thinking? That's traditionally what has been the method of religion. And I'm using religion lowercase r, just broadly, faith systems, to get you to believe what they believe. Or instead, are we just trying to convert them to do what Galatians 5 says it is for freedom he set you free? Not so you'd worship him, not so you'd agree with him, not so you would model your life after him. All of those are good things. But that you were set free just so you'd be free. So that in that place of freedom, where you don't have all of these external pressures, all of these desires to perform, that these needs to, in order to be loved, you have to do X, Y, and Z, but that you just exist in a state of freedom. And in that state, all you encounter is love. And so what our end goal is I think a question that we should ask ourselves frequently. What is my motivation here? To convert people to a line of thinking that, academically is termed Trinitarian inclusion, because that's what I believe? Or is my intention to simply let them see themselves free and trust the Spirit of God enough to lead them in the direction with their life that they're called to go? Even if in the short term, my perception may not like or agree with the direction that freedom allows them to go. That's the risk of freedom.
How about if we just encourage them? How about if we just encourage them to be who God made them? Just tell them it's okay. Paul Young, man of love, you're included. What do you mean I'm included? You're included in the kingdom of God. Well, I can't be because I do this and I don't do that and da 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 da. And he says, well, and when he said that, immediately it came to me, if we confess our sins, in other words, if we realize our shortcomings, he's faithful and just to forgive them. In reality, the minute you start saying, well, I'm not sure I'm included here, you're all of a sudden starting to clean the slate Because the fact of the matter is, all we need to do with people is encourage them to be who God made them. And be them, not our image of them, not what somebody told us they ought to be, but them. And I love what Dr. Sue said. I mean, be who you are. Everybody else is taken. And that's exactly what each one of these individuals was created as, who they are by the Creator in love. Who could tell them to be anything better than that?
Amen. Carol Ann.
I think Jeremy was first. He had his hand up earlier.
Okay, I missed you there, Jeremy. Go ahead.
Hey guys, I love this. Bob, I love hearing your heart. It's got me fired up. The one thing I wanted to just kind of chime in, high five and exclamation point is, this conversation is so pertinent because it's really what God's doing in my own life. Is, as I have become, a Trinitarian Union reconciliation guy, the problem was I still had a sword in my hand. And we see this per se in the garden. And Peter is defending Jesus, which is an amazing, perfect, absolutely noble thing. But in the midst of defending the Christ, the Savior of the universe, his whole posture was completely wrong, and then the Savior of the universe had to fix that by healing the ear of the person that needed the message of the gospel the most. And that story in the garden has really just arrested my heart for the last month. And I just love this conversation because I feel like I'm asking this question. Is there ever a time, and I don't know the answer, this is more of a rhetorical question in the context of this conversation, but in perfect love, is there ever a time where I need to take out my sword against wrong doctrine, people that don't see the way I do, because I'm not sure if there is anymore. And not to go on the other side of being passive and not assertive, because I'm a very assertive person and I'm a very passionate person. But with that, there's a passion for a compassion that is supernatural for me right now. Because I look at people, genuine believers in the Western Church, and I'm overwhelmed with compassion because they're missing the wholeness of the gospel and the nature of Christ, period.
I'm willing to
And
bet
I
the guy that
don't
got
want
his
to
ear.
attack that. I want to heal that.
I'll
I
bet
wanna
you the
be-
guy that got his ear. Go ahead.
I want to be Jesus in the scene in the garden, and I want to be the one healing the ear, not whacking it off. So,
But the guy that got his ear whacked off, I'll bet became a believer right on the spot. What do you bet?
well,
Think about that.
you can mark my words, but as I understand it, church history tells us that later on Malchus actually died in prison because he addressed Pilate and the Sanhedrin and was like, you guys killed the wrong guy. And somehow, some way, history tells us that he actually died in prison because he stood up for the nature of Jesus.
Yeah,
Even
go ahead, Bob.
I'd never seen it that way before, Jeremy. That's a revelation to me, that even the guy, I'm a Peter personality. I had a preacher tell me that one time, I don't know when you're going to walk across the baptistry or cut somebody's ear off, and so I kind of relate to Pete. And even in his zeal to and pulling out his sword and cutting a man's ear off, God, Jesus on the spot used that. I didn't know the man's name until now, by the way. You said it was Malchus. God God took that zeal. I think sometimes we have to pull our sword out, Jeremy, to answer your question. And maybe we have to whack an ear or two off in order for the Lord to come back and heal it. And all of a sudden says, wait a minute, what have I been doing here? I mean, I went through that about 14 years ago. Wait a minute, what am I doing? And I went through a time where I felt pretty whacked on. And I think it was the Spirit that was whacking on me, because we needed to whittle away some stuff. We needed to get my ear fixed. I wasn't hearing right. That's a powerful observation, brother. Powerful observation.
And I love your perspective, Bob. And like I said, I don't know the answer to that question. You know, I just know my tendency up until about 9 months ago was I swing my sword and ask questions later because I know his grace was sufficient for my weakness. and now there's a overwhelming compassion and a empathy as I'm seeing the gospel more clearly, not to do the same poison that Western Christian and evangelicals have done on the flip side. So I love this conversation. And Matt, I have a question. Okay, I'm gonna try to boil it down into 2 sentences. If we are the righteousness of Christ and we can't grow in righteousness, then could it be true that we are innately the love of Christ and we actually can't grow in love either? We just have to participate with it?
Yes. Uh, this gets into, it is my favorite subject, Jeremy. So the check is in the mail, my brother. Everybody that brings this up gets a special offering. Good night, Jane. We live in a competing pull between what is objectively true and what's subjectively true. Objective truth is fixed. A table is a table. We all should be able to agree what a table is, even if they may look different, even if one table might be one material, but a table is a table. It's definitively true. We possess righteousness. We've been deemed righteous. Not levels of righteous, just righteous. We are carriers, if in fact the life we live is now the life of Christ, that exchange took place, we live a life of love. It is the essence of who we are. Yet the subjective comes in where we grow in it. We possess it in fullness, but we increase in awareness. The vision gets better and better. It's not as if 1 minute I have eyes and 1 minute I don't when I go to the optometrist. I had eyes the whole time. Just as my eyes matured, tweaking was needed so I could see more sharply, more focused. We always had sight. It was a matter of the vision being clarified. So yeah, I don't believe love grows. I don't believe righteousness expands, but our awareness of its existence does, and that awareness functionally speaking, is really all that matters. Because on the one hand, we can say the entire world is filled to the brim with the righteousness and love of God, that they are incapable of having any more. And that sounds great. And again, I believe it's objectively true. But when the rubber meets the road and people are still believing lies and delusions, and it's the nature of what causes addiction, in that you have this lack of awareness of your worth and value, and so you become self-destructive, and that spills out into other people, and that whole context is the awareness of it. To think of it, when Jesus is a kid, right? What does it tell us? That he awakened to his identity, and that he grew in wisdom and stature. So now wait a minute. If he's fully man and fully God eternally, how in the world does he grow in wisdom? How because stature makes sense as people get to know who he is. His stature rises, and people know who he is as he's more well known, and that we can wrap our head around that. But how does he grow in wisdom if he in fact is wisdom? It's his innate nature. Awakening to me is the answer. That's where I can find the common thread. That we awaken. The veil is pulled back more and more and more, and we're able to see him more clearly. Not he becomes bigger, but we see him larger. We see him more crisp. The image is more precise. The unveiling process, and it is a process. I think all of us could probably say we've had those conversion moments like the one Bob described for him. And likely we've had multiples in our lives. Those big moments where there was a turning point, where something clicked, some event occurred that triggered a major prism change, a major course correction in our vision was now adjusted. And yet it's not just usually one, it's usually a series of these. That one led to that one, led to that one, led to that one. And it becomes this little bunny trail that you can trace back and see how each individual interaction and each old school, we call it each revelation, which is fine, each awakening, each little prism adjustment to our lens. And all of a sudden the picture's clearer. And I don't know about you, if you wear glasses, you understand what I mean. When your prescription's getting a little wonky, like it's time for an eye appointment, you still see better with them than without them. Like, when you wake up in the morning, everything's really blurry, and I could demonstrate this if I could find my glasses, but I can't see them, which is often what happens. I put them down and can't find them because I can't see them. Now I can see them. When I put my glasses on, all of a sudden, boy, everything's nice and crisp, and I can see clear. Until I go to the eye doctor the next time. And then they start tweaking with the number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. Can I see number 1 again? And you go back and start over again. As you go through that process, all of a sudden I realized I wasn't seeing very clear at all with these. I thought I was, because it was a heck of a lot clearer than I see with no glasses at all. But now that they've tweaked my prescription, man, I was seeing dimly. I was seeing through a haze. There was objects far away that I didn't think I'd be able to see, and with the right prescription, man, those are crystal clear. That I think is this awakening. It's this awareness. It's little by little by little by little that we're not trying to get into a room we're already in, and yet little by little we notice more about the room that we're in. We recognize, hey, I never noticed that tapestry before. I never noticed that painting on the wall. Wait a minute. You go on like TikTok, there's this thing, where people go to their grandma's house, and each time you go, you take something out of the house. And the idea is that grandma has so much stuff everywhere, she'll never notice that you took it. And then at Christmas, you open these gifts, you give them to one another and open them. And grandma's like, oh, wow, I have one just like that. And then but as each gift gets opened, grandma realizes, wait a minute, these are all my things. When a room becomes second nature, As you're used to interacting with God in a certain way in that room, Old Testament would have called it the Holy of Holies, perfectly fine analogy, where we are existing in that room of union and oneness. We get used to the room. We get accustomed to where everything is in the room until all of a sudden we realize there's depth to this space I've not encountered before. I haven't changed rooms. I'm just seeing things now that I never saw before. I'm awakening to something that was always there and always true of me. And that's the beauty that's found in this. If we're not trying, Jane earlier put in the saved or something for what? Let me get the actual statement because it was really good. The reach them for what? Like when we're trying to reach people, reach them for what? It's a good question. It's one we need to ponder. What is the end game? What is it we're trying to do? And what I would say is, if it isn't simply to awaken them to a state that already is, not what they could be, not what their life could be if they change this, that, and the other. Not no. We're identifying and proclaim what is the gospel. What is it to express the good news? You're expressing something that already is, not something that theoretically could be if they make some form of decision. You're identifying a state that pre-exists the person. If the Lamb was slain before the foundation of the world, and that word world there, the better translation, it before the fall, before everything fell apart, this was already done. This was already accomplished. If we approach it from that perspective, all we're doing is proclaiming what is. Not trying to change anybody, not trying to get them to see the world the way we see. You are free. You have been freed. It's done. You are no longer a slave. And I apologize. Actually, I'm going to turn over to whoever wants to speak next here in just a second. I may have given this example before. I can never remember where I say things. I think it was in one of these way back. The War of 1812. You're thinking, Matt, no one cares about the War of 1812, including people who were in the War of 1812. Nevertheless, it's a good example. Bear with me. War of 1812. When the war ends, do you know the largest battle of the War of 1812 is the Battle of New Orleans? And if you look at a calendar, like you look at a timeline of the war, you'll notice the date the war ended, like the official declaration, the war is over, is before the Battle of New Orleans, which was the largest battle in the war. So now I remember being, a college history major, scratching my head here, wondering, I don't understand this. How can the largest battle of a war take place after the war was over? Because I'm coming at this from my 20th century thinking here of, well, when the war is over, it's over. That's the date. It's done. And my professor kind of, smirked. And he says, you can tell somebody grew up in a world of their own phone line and internet access. And because you do realize it took a while to get a message from England, where they're deciding the end of the war, back to the States. Washington is in ruin. It was burned to the ground. So our government is meeting, I think, in New York or Philadelphia. And then they would have had to send a message from them to New Orleans. That takes a lot of time. And he said, so what's the moral? And I'm just sitting there all dumbstruck, like I'm barely understanding what you've told me so far. I have nothing to contribute to this discussion, sir. Just tell me the answer. And he said, what it tells us is this. While a war may be over, and this guy was an agnostic. He has no idea what preaching he was doing when he said this. He said, when the war is over, it's over. But it only really matters that the war is over if people know it's over. Until people know the war is over, they will keep fighting. The fact the war is over is irrelevant if people don't know. And I'm even then I was like, yep, that'll preach. That will preach right there. That's that awakening. The War of 1812 was over. There was no need for the Battle of New Orleans to take place. But all of the combatants in it didn't know the war was over. And so they kept doing the same thing they had always done, fighting. All we're declaring, all the gospel essentially is there's no war. It's done. You're not trying to earn anything. You're not trying to get anywhere. You're already there. All the warfare is done. It's accomplished. It's finished. There's not a thing left for you to do. When Jesus said it is finished, it is everything. The entire process is complete. You are just seeing it. That's it. Carol Ann, did you have something
Carol Ann
earlier?
has got to be the most patient. Yeah.
I'm
Carol
telling
Ann's
you.
ultra patient, man.
Well, I don't know what kind of time frame we're on if we were, but anyway,
Good.
so I come from a different experience. I mean, I was raised Southern Baptist and was full of the religion and constantly rededicating my life. But whether it was self-hatred or just a bad gene, I became quite the alcoholic and started in AA 8 years ago. And we share in our meetings our experience, strength, and hope. We do not crosstalk. I'm just saying in a meeting, it's, you listen to what people say, but I will crosstalk here and say, I really appreciated that Einstein quote, Vicky, because I just heard that quote this last week, and I'm in full agreement with you. But when I'm listening to what sounds to me like a call that we're to go out and try to change people or affect them, or I have to be very careful not to get a list of these things I need to be and do. And so my daily life, my daily walk is connecting with the mind of Christ that's in me and has been in me all along, and that wonderful counselor lead me in not only in growing me and who he is, making me aware of what's in the room, but he leads me in love. He'll counsel me what not to say to my husband, but rather maybe what to say to my husband, or limited what I say to my husband. Like, thank you, instead of really, is that how you're going to do that? You know what I'm saying? AA taught me to let go of trying to change people, places, and things, and just be. And the whole goal for me, that had a very hard time sitting still my whole life, is just to be still and be and move in what I understand and know God is. And that might be blessing somebody, that might be, but it's not me deciding I'm going to go do this, because that would be a loving thing to do. And I need to be loved because God is love. No, I need to be, right, more authentically the creation, the daughter I am, the love, the beloved one. And the other thing about emotions, I mean, God delights in us. He dances over us. He has joy. So he's full of emotion, right? But he does, and he's taught me how to not react to my emotions, like trigger, let's go. And that's the first thing I thought of when I saw your, provoke, right? Trigger, oh, I can't believe you said that. Oh, that hurt, or that gets me excited. And not to react, but rather to, and this is Steve McVeigh's teaching this last week in Living Supernaturally, is to respond. And he uses that quote that Vicky said, and you can't solve the problem inside the problem. You've got to rise above that problem and see it from a higher perspective. You see more in the room, you see everything, right? You see more, and you see more options, and God will lead me in the option, even if that's to do nothing. And yeah, so I really appreciate what you guys had to say.
That's beautiful. I had a psychology professor, but really very wise guy, very wise man, and he made the comment that the number one thing he would do when he was dealing with individuals experiencing huge amounts of depression. So we're talking major depression, potentially manic, where there's like some mood distress, bipolarism type at work. And the first thing he would recommend is some type of volunteerism, something that took them out of themselves. And if they were people of faith, I went to a Lutheran seminary, so he was Lutheran, and his thought was, I'm sending them on a missions trip. I am sending them somewhere in the third world where they are going to encounter a perspective of what everyday life is like for somebody else. And it reframes the nature in which we see ourselves. And so, I'm a student in the classroom, I'm listening to this, okay. And he goes, it's like a puzzle. If all you look at all the time is your piece, and you look at your piece, you don't know where it goes, it's kind of cracked on the edges, the image is starting to get peeled off one of the corners. All things considered, your piece is up close kind of ugly. You're not a fan of your piece. But then when you put the piece down on the table with the other puzzle pieces, and you realize everybody's puzzle piece is kind of in the exact same situation. It's feels kind of alone. It feels isolated. It's part of a whole. When combined together, it represents a picture, right? A whole picture. But disconnected and separate, it doesn't understand its place. It's just sitting there. And then he said, but until you zoom out, when you zoom out and you can see all of the puzzle pieces, and you have the picture on the box as a frame of reference, you can then see how everything connects together. And all of a sudden, that little piece that you just perseverated on and you looked at from every angle, and it didn't accomplish anything for you. It just was a blob of blue. It didn't look like anything. When you connect it to the rich tapestry that is the whole, and you see it in its interconnectedness to everything else, you realize how ridiculous the picture would look without it. And then that's the end of his story, but I'm lapsing into my thought on this now. Have you ever had that happen where I hate puzzles, but I've watched people put puzzles together. I don't have the patience for it. But I'll watch Carrie and my mother-in-law put a puzzle together. My nephew used to take a piece before they started, and he'd just hold it back, until they're all looking everywhere for it, because the puzzle's not done until every piece is where it's supposed to be. Have you ever looked at a puzzle that's missing a piece? Like, it's put together, but there's a spot where you can't find that piece? It impacts the picture. It's not the same as when the whole thing is in its entirety. That's the significance of just one little puzzle piece. But if we just look at the piece, it looks like nothing. It looks insignificant. It doesn't represent a picture. We have no idea what we're looking at. No single piece of a puzzle has any kind of indication as to what the whole is. It doesn't in any way connect in and of itself to the big picture. But then when it's put within the big picture, within the rest of the pieces, and what did Scripture say? Because I got to bring this back to a relevant point of what we're doing. We are fitly joined together. Can the hand say to the foot, I have no need of you? No, we are interconnected into this. We are so linked that our value is found as part of the existence in the whole. That yes, we have individual worth. The puzzle piece was just as valuable isolated as it was connected to the whole. But the beauty of what it was functioned to be is only evidenced within the whole, in isolation, in separated thinking. And it's because, again, we're never truly separated. The picture on the box is still there, even if the puzzle pieces are behaving weird. The picture's still there to look at. But as we link the pieces together, and then in that linking, we see our more global worth. It's not the linking that gives us worth. It gives us the ability to see it. Our perception of self alters every time we see how we function among the greater whole. That's the beauty of what is the church. And I'm using that in the sense of the way scripture intends it within the ecclesia, not the institution, not the denominational systems. Those theoretically can be part of it. That's not what I mean, though. I'm talking about the gathering. The beauty of the gathering was you are connecting the beauty of your piece with another piece. And it's in that connection that I get to get an understanding of what the value of my piece is. My piece by itself over in a corner, and I can only see it, and it doesn't make any sense to me, and it doesn't look like it fits in anywhere. When it connects, that's when we identify the value that has been there the whole time. And I would submit to you, which remember is just the academic way of saying I can't prove this, and I'm not trying to start a fight, but it occurred to me, so I'll say it. I submit to you that when we aren't connected in that capacity, we are missing out on the big picture. We're missing out on the value of the interconnectedness of the union. And even though we know we're in, we are included in all that he is, until we see it, it is functionally irrelevant. It's when we see it that it becomes real to us. Not true. It's been eternally true from before the foundation of the world, but now it becomes real. Yeah, I so love these. We never end where we start. We have no idea what twists and turns we are going to take along the way. And I thoroughly enjoy the journey, and I have to believe this is how it's supposed to be. Do you realize each of us came in today with a puzzle piece? We had an idea of what these concepts were. We had, even if you looked at the notes before we came in and you had a general rubric of the direction we were moving, until the puzzle pieces get together, until they're able to see how these fit, we miss out on so much of the beauty of all this experience is supposed to be. That yes, we possess the fullness of the Spirit. It's not like I have a piece and you have a piece and you. No, we all possess the fullness of the Spirit. But my expression of that piece, my expression of the fullness of who He is different than Carol Ann's. It's different than Vicky's. And if all I have is mine to look at, I never grow in my awareness. I stay the exact same because I am not independently capable of changing myself, morphing my thinking within myself. But as I'm influenced by their perceptions, and we become sounding boards of that thought. I love where if you notice, it becomes a domino effect. One person comments, that triggers a thought in somebody else. And it's even cool when we don't get to everybody in the right order, because then I've noticed when we do get to that person, I'm going to use Carol Ann as an example. When Carol Ann then spoke, what she brought into the equation was now a bounce off of two other thoughts that had been expressed that took those a step further. And now at the end, we all, the pieces of the puzzle coming in with our own unique prejudices, I use the word loosely, but our own perceptions of situations and ideas and concepts, we now leave with an entirely different set of procedures in our mind, of perceptions, solely based on the interaction that just occurred. And so I know it's a term that has all kinds of burdens attached to it and a lot of traumas attached to it. But in its purest sense, I think it's significant that we realize we just quote unquote experienced the nature of the collective church. That we weren't even able to be physically together in the midst of it. And it nevertheless happens. It nevertheless births, that spirit to spirit communicates. And the end result is we all see the picture far better than we did coming in the room. The picture didn't change. Our value didn't change. Our worth didn't change. That's eternally stated. It's done. But I can only speak for me. I sure as heck see it a lot clearer than I did an hour and 20 minutes ago. This is in the early church, and by the way, think Acts. book of Acts, when they discuss the idea of what First Corinthians says, where each person brings their piece. If you have a song, you sing. If you have a word of edification, you say it. If you have a teaching, you teach it. That is what the gathering was. And we can glean from, Paul's instructions to Titus and Timothy. There's some kind of facilitation concept. There's some kind of order to the method, but yet each person is bringing their piece. Each person's bringing the whole of who they are, and it gets connected with other wholes, and it paints a picture that otherwise would never be seen. It's astounding. I'm rambling, but this concept, I'm living in this concept right now. This is just amazing to me. The nature of what we are able to experience when we realize our value and engage in that same value with other people. This is what I think life living is supposed to be. Anyone have any concluding thoughts as we go ahead and begin to close out here tonight?
Well, I love what you're saying, and I wanted to share something. One of my wife's spontaneous revelations. A couple of years ago, I was doing dishes, and she asked this spontaneous question. She was like, "Why do the living creatures in the throne room, why are they full of eyes?" And me being the novice Bible scholar that I thought I had all my answers, I'm like, "Ma, I don't know." And then she's like, "What if you needed multiple perspectives in order to see Jesus clearly?" And I mean, she mic'd up and just blew my brains out. I was like, "Oh my goodness," that stuck with me for the last several years. And I just wanted to share that because that kind of feels like the exclamation point of what you're saying and all of us are saying tonight, Matt, is I believe it takes multiple perspectives and ideas to see Jesus and get anything right. So that's my last 2 cents before my phone dies.
It's good to see you, my brother. All right, Saints.
Brother Jeremy,
Oh.
I'm going to send a song to Matt to send to you. If it's okay, Matt, I will send you a song to send Jeremy.
Definitely.
Wow.
You know
what,
Bob,
folks?
if you just want to hit me up on Messenger, I think we could accidentally talk until the wee hours of the morning.
I think
Love you,
I think you're
brother.
right. I'll get this song to you. I know Matt wears glasses because he's reached that age. I know that was something his eye doctor told him, and it bothered him. But you get the feeling maybe we're getting to see what the Hubble scope's showing, or maybe even the Webb. See, that's all been out there all along, but now we're getting to see it.
Yep. No, again, let's not throw the Old Testament all the way out. There's applicability to it. There's some value in there. When Ecclesiastes says there's nothing new under the sun, it's the truth. There is nothing new. We're just seeing it. And it feels new. If you've never seen it, it sure feels new. But there's that safety in knowing it's always been. We just couldn't see it before.
Lord, thank you for vision. Lord, your word says your young men will see vision and your old men will dream dreams. Thank you for letting me still see vision, Lord. Thank you for putting me in the company of those that see vision. Thank you for putting me in the company of those that cause me to see vision, that open my eyes wider, that literally enlarge my pupils so I can learn. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. It's beyond my comprehension what you're doing, but boy, I'm glad to be in on it. I ask you to bless these people. Lord, continue to have them pour into me. Continue to let us pour into each other, that our communion be the pure word of you, and that our cup runs over with it. It spills out on everybody around us. Thank you so much, Lord. Thank you so much. Amen.
Man, I'm just going to real quick read this passage to you. This is from it's Isaiah 60. And we know Isaiah said, "Rise and shine, for your light has come." We know that passage. It's verse 4. I want to point out. It begins with this: "Lift up your eyes round about and see." That's all that's happening. Our eyes are being lifted off the objects of our affection, those things we've focused on for so long, which historically has been the ways we don't measure up, the ways we don't we aren't everything we perceive ourselves to need to be, and we lift up our eyes and we can see. It is always a pleasure to see each and every one of you. Blessings to you, and we will regroup for chapel in 2 weeks' time. Until then, be well, be blessed, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Be blessed.